The information provided by Trading Forex Price Action to you does not constitute personal financial advice. The information provided is of a general nature only and does not take into account your individual objectives, financial situation, or needs. It should not be used, relied upon, or treated as a substitute for specific professional advice.
Hey guys, this is a weekly forecast for September 19th through the 23rd of 2022. Okay, let's start off with the dollar Swiss pair. Okay, this is a monthly chart. We'll start off with an overview. So since at the current moment, there is no obvious overarching strength whether long or short. However, there were 3 monthly rejection candles that formed right here, possibly indicating that current price is in the beginning stages of overarching trend down. And so as long as this pivot high right here is not reached, in the long term, I'm short biased right back down to this pivot low right here. And over on the weekly chart, since there was a short trade that formed right here and a long trade that formed right here, and I'm still waiting for the lower time frames to confirm that weekly bias. In the short term, I am neutral biased. Okay, let's talk entries. Okay, this is the weekly chart. Let me run you by what's been happening on this pair for the last couple of months. So back in May, there was a strong short trade that formed right here. And then about a month and a half later, there was a week-long trade that formed right here. And so the weekly bias was short, or in other words, price was likely to reach this pivot low before reaching this pivot high. And there was a nice pullback for that short entry, and that main target was hit right here. And then moreover, about a month ago, there was another long trade that formed right here. And so the current weekly bias that we're dealing with is between this last weekly short trade right here against this new weekly long trade that formed right here. Okay, so let's first see what's providing short strength for this short trade, as well as what's providing long strength for this long trade. So let's go over to the monthly chart. Alright, so on this monthly chart, that weekly short trade formed in this area, while that weekly long trade formed in this area. Now let's start off with this short trade. So the monthly elements that are providing short strength for this short trade are 3 gap levels. So let me show you the levels for that. Okay, so the first gap's upper level is 1.00223, and the lower level is at 0.99999. Okay, so the second gap, the upper level, is at 0.98633, and the lower level is at 0.98484. And the third gap right here, the upper level, is at 0.98886, and the lower level is at 0.97987. Okay, so these 3 gaps right here is providing short strength for that weekly short trade. Let's go on to this long trade right here. We have 2 gaps on this side also that's providing long strength for that weekly long trade. Let me show you the levels for that. The first one is very minimal. The upper level will be at 0.95403, while the lower level is at 0.95279. Okay, and the slightly bigger one down here, the upper level is at 0.95031, and the lower level is at 0.94757. Okay, so in terms of this time's weekly bias, there's really only gaps that are providing short strength and long strength. And going simply by these price elements, there seems to be more short strength than this long strength. Now that's due to 2 factors. Number one, these upper gaps right here are slightly bigger than the ones down here, right? And the second is that there's 3 gaps right here providing short strength, while there's only 2 providing long strength. Okay, so again, going strictly from these price elements, that weekly bias seems to be short. Okay, but as you guys know, the lower confirmations have the ultimate say in terms of these biases. So let's see what's happening on the lower confirmations. Let's go over to the daily chart. Alright, so on this daily chart, that weekly short trade formed in this area and the long trade formed in this area. Now soon after that weekly long trade formed, there was actually daily strong long confirmation that formed right here. And that's from this trend line, from this pivot to this pivot right here. There was a breakout and immediate break back in, showing normal short strength. However, price came right back up to that pivot high, which made strong long strength and thus confirming that weekly bias to be long at this point. Okay, so we do have conflicting signals. For the monthly price elements are stating that the weekly bias is short, while the lower confirmations are actually confirming a weekly long bias. Okay, so let me show you what I'll be looking for in terms of how I'm going to trade this weekly bias. Okay, so at a basic level, I do want a short entry because that's along with the monthly trend I was explaining in the overview, where there were 3 monthly rejection candles showing a possible beginning to overarching downtrend. Okay, so what I'm going to need is for the lower time frame confirmations to confirm this weekly bias to be short. But recall, because of this daily breakout and break back in, the lower confirmations is confirming a long bias at this point. So what I'll be looking for is a breakout from this trend line, from this pivot to this pivot right here. Now if we get price to pull up a little and come back down to this trend line, break it out and immediately break back in, creating normal long strength. However, price coming right back down to make strong short strength, well then that will confirm that weekly bias to be short, and I'll be willing to take a short entry with a stop loss at this pivot high right here and its main target right here. And moreover, since the monthly overarching bias is short, I'll be willing to extend a portion right back down to lower levels. Okay, so we'll just have to see what happens with this one, and I'll keep you guys updated. All right, so let's go on to the dollar CAD. Okay, and if you're having trouble understanding what I'm talking about in terms of weekly biases and lower confirmations, please watch my price action trading course. For that course is designed to provide you the necessary information so you can understand these forecasts. Okay, this is the monthly chart. We'll start off with an overview. So since there was normal long strength formed in this area with a breakout and immediate break back in of this trend line from this pivot to this pivot right here, creating normal long strength. However, this type of compact rising price action is often indicative of a fall right back down to this pivot low right here to create strong short strength. And so in the long term, I'm short biased right back down to this pivot low right here. And moreover, since there was a weekly short trade that formed right here and a long trade that formed right here back in April, and that weekly bias was long, and that main target was just hit this week right at this level right here. And so in the short term, I'm neutral biased. Okay, let's talk entries. All right, this is the weekly chart. Let me run you by what's been happening on this pair for the last couple of months. So the last weekly long trade that formed was right here. And then about 2 months later, there was a weak short trade that formed right here. And so the weekly bias was long, or in other words, price is likely to reach this pivot high before reaching this pivot low. And that main target was hit right here. And then moreover, about 2.5 to 3 months ago, there was actually another weak short trade that formed right here. And so at this point, the weekly bias was comparing the strength factor between this short trade right here against the last weekly long trade right here. And on the lower time frames, roughly in these areas right here, there was lower confirmation of strong long strength, and thus confirming this weekly bias to be long. Or in other words, price is likely to reach this pivot high before reaching this pivot low. And that main target was just hit this week at this point right here. And so at the current moment, the weekly bias is back to neutral. Now, just for educational purposes, let me just show you what happened on the lower time frames that confirmed this long bias roughly in these areas. So let's go over to the 4-hour chart. Okay, so on this 4-hour chart, that weekly short trade formed roughly in these areas right here. And then about a month later, right at this level right here, there was a breakout and immediate break back in of this trend line from this pivot to this pivot right here, confirming normal short strength. However, price came right back up to that pivot high to create strong long strength, and thus confirming that weekly bias to be long. And so price made its move right up to that target level, just shy of it, because the target level is right here. And short-term short strength kicked back in to bring price right back down. And then last week we got this push all the way up to here, and finally this week we hit that main target at this level right here. Okay, so again, since that main target was hit for that weekly bias, the weekly bias is back to neutral. So let me go ahead and show you what I'll be looking for in the coming months to trade this pair. Let's go back to the weekly chart. Okay, so on this weekly chart, the long trade we'll still be working with is that last weekly long trade that formed right here. And so in the coming weeks, I'll be waiting for a new weekly short trade to form so I could compare the strength differential of this short trade's short strength and this long trade's long strength to come up with a weekly bias, whether long or short. Okay, and there's one last thing I do want to mention in terms of price action for the long-term outlook on this pair. Let's go back to the monthly chart. Alright, so like I mentioned on the overview, there was normal long strength formed right here with this breakout and immediate break back in. However, I was also mentioning that the way price is moving up right here is often indicative of price falling right back down to make strong short strength. However, that said, 2 months ago, there was an opportunity for this fall to happen. However, it did not. So let me go ahead and explain that to you. Okay, so 2 months ago, right on this candle right here, there was a nice rejection candle. Now, by a rejection candle, I just mean it's a hammer, basically. So it's a candle with a very high wick, showing that price was rejected at higher levels and closed right at the bottom of the entire candle. Now, in a situation like this, where there's normal strength created and price gives a nice rangy pullback and a rejection candle forms, that often becomes an ignition for that fall all the way down to make strong short strength. However, what happened was that right up to 2 months ago on the lower time frames, there was a lot of sellers in this market. However, last month and this month on the lower time frames again, a lot of buyers just started to come in all of a sudden. And price was pushed right back up to that pivot high of that rejection candle. So in terms of that overarching short strength I was mentioning, even if another rejection candle does form in the future, I'll be constantly watching the lower time frames in the next couple of months to confirm that there is no lower time frame long strength kicking back in, so I can make sure what happened last time does not happen again, because it does seem that price was forced back up 2 months ago, and that can possibly happen again also. Okay, so that's just something to keep in mind. Okay, so that's it for the weekly forecast. First of all, I want to thank you guys for your kind words while I was dealing with my medical issues. I really appreciate your kindness because you guys didn't have to send those messages, but you guys did, and that means a lot in my book. So thank you guys. But in regards to this channel, I'll gradually increase the pairs that I analyze and slowly get back on schedule. And moreover, next week, I'll be posting lesson 2 of my price action trading course for beginners titled Candlestick Basics. So please look forward to that. Okay, so again, thank you guys for your support, and I hope you guys have a great week, guys. Okay, bye.